sick. Now that she's gone, you're just an expensive habit I'm cutting out. Those were the exact words my husband of 20 years said right before he tossed my suitcases onto the driveway and slammed the front door in my face, leaving me stranded in the pouring rain. Everyone in our town thought we had the perfect marriage, but they had no idea about the dark, calculated secret my husband had been hiding since the day we said our vows. As I sat in my car, shivering and drenched, I realized I had two choices: accept the ruins of the life he stole from me, or use the one hidden detail he completely overlooked to dismantle his entire world. Before we get into how I made him regret the very day he met me, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your city below so I can see how far my story travels. My name is Rachel, and at 44 years old, I found myself sitting in the driver's seat of my car, staring blankly through a windshield blurred by the pouring rain. The steady, aggressive drumming of the storm on the metal roof was the only sound cutting through the suffocating silence of my new reality. Just 10 minutes ago, I was a wife, a partner, and a woman who believed her sacrifices meant something. Now, I was just an inconvenience that had been coldly discarded. For over 20 years, I poured my entire heart and soul into my marriage with David. When his mother, Evelyn, fell deeply ill 5 years ago, I didn't hesitate for a single second. I walked away from my own growing career, stepped back from my personal ambitions, and became her full-time caregiver. I endured the sleepless nights, the endless medical routines, and the heavy emotional toll of watching her decline, all because I loved my husband and believed we were a team building a future together. But the moment Evelyn drew her final breath, the illusion shattered. David didn't see a devoted wife when he looked at me. He saw a contract that had successfully reached its expiration date. Sitting alone in the dark cabin of my car, shivering from the damp cold, the sheer weight of his betrayal began to settle into my chest. My whole life had been meticulously reduced to a transactional trap, and I was left with absolutely nothing but the clothes on my back. The nightmare had actually begun 3 days earlier, right after Evelyn's funeral. The funeral flowers were still fresh, and the heavy scent of lilies lingered in the air as the last of the grieving guests finally left our house. The moment the front door clicked shut, David's warm, sorrowful expression completely vanished, replaced by a cold, businesslike detachment that made my blood run cold. Without saying a single word, he walked over to his desk, picked up a thick manila folder, and dropped it onto the coffee table right in front of me. "What is this, David?" I asked, my voice trembling from the exhaustion of the past few weeks. He didn't look at me with sympathy. Instead, his eyes swept over me with a calculated indifference. "Those are divorce papers, Clara," he said flatly, his tone completely devoid of emotion. "My mother's gone, and so is your job. I only needed you to care for her when she was sick. Now, you're just an expensive habit I'm cutting out." He then handed me a single, pre-packed suitcase. He explained with terrifying calm that his mother's massive estate was legally protected by the ruthless prenuptial agreement he had pressured me into signing 2 decades ago. Because I had given up my career to tend his family, I had no assets in my name, no income, and no legal claim to a single dime of the inheritance. He gave me exactly 10 minutes to leave. The heavy rain pounded against my windshield as I drove away from the neighborhood that had been my home for 2 entire decades. With my mind racing and tears blurring my vision, I pulled into the parking lot of a faded, low-budget motel on the outskirts of town. It was the only place I could afford using the meager personal savings I had left in my private account. The room smelled faintly of old dust and cheap cleaner, a stark and depressing contrast to the luxurious, pristine house I had just been thrown out of. Shivering from the damp cold, I unzipped the single suitcase David had packed for me and began sorting through my clothes. As I reached the very bottom of the bag, my hand brushed against something hard, heavy, and completely unexpected. Tucked beneath a layer of winter sweaters was a small, locked wooden jewelry box. I instantly recognized it. It belonged to Evelyn, and I must have frantically swept it into my bag during those chaotic, panicked final 10 minutes in our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the creaking bed, staring at the polished mahogany box. David had always kept it locked away, telling me it held nothing but sentimental trinkets of no real value. Desperate for answers, I found a small hairpin in my purse, inserted it into the old brass lock, and twisted it until it gave a sharp click. When I lifted the lid, I didn't find jewelry. Instead, I noticed the interior base felt unnaturally shallow. I pried at the edge with my fingernails, and the hidden false bottom popped open, revealing a collection of tightly folded financial journals and a secret medical power of attorney document. I stayed up all night under the dim, flickering light of the motel room, carefully reading through every single page of Evelyn's private journal entries from the last 2 years of her life. As I turned the pages, the raw honesty of her words brought tears to my eyes, but it also made my blood boil with a cold fury. The journals exposed a shocking truth that David had spent years trying to hide from everyone. Evelyn actually loved me like her own daughter, and she deeply distrusted her own son. According to her detailed notes, Evelyn had slowly realized that David's sudden attentiveness during her illness wasn't born out of love, but out of pure greed. He had been systematically skimming massive sums of money from her personal estate accounts while she was bedridden, assuming she was too weak to notice. But Evelyn was sharp until the very end. She had kept a meticulous log of every unauthorized transfer, every forged signature, and every lie David had told her to gain control of her fortune. Most importantly, the final pages contained a copy of a legal amendment to the family trust that she had secretly executed with her personal lawyer just months before passing away. It was a hidden clause David didn't know existed, one that explicitly stated the family prenuptial agreement would be rendered completely null and void if any form of financial elder abuse or fraud was proven against him. David thought he had left me penniless, but Evelyn had quietly handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy him. The very next morning, I quietly sought out a brilliant estate lawyer who specialized in family fraud and financial elder abuse. Sitting in her office, I laid out Evelyn's private journals, the hidden trust amendment, and the detailed logs of David's unauthorized transactions. As my attorney meticulously cross-referenced the journal entries with public records, her expression shifted from professional focus to pure disbelief. We quickly uncovered a massive, undeniable paper trail proving that David had illegally transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars out of his mother's accounts while she was completely incapacitated. Instead of rushing to court and exposing our hand early, my lawyer advised me to play a much longer, more calculated game. "Let him believe he has completely won," she whispered with a sharp smile. "An overconfident man makes the biggest mistakes." Following her precise instructions, I played the part of the broken, defeated ex-wife perfectly. Whenever David's legal team sent over preliminary separation demands, I complied without a single complaint. I purposefully signed the initial paperwork, intentionally letting David think I was too exhausted and intimidated to challenge his cruel terms. He even sent me a smug text message mocking my lack of fight, entirely convinced that his mother's fortune and the prenuptial agreement were perfectly secure. He had absolutely no idea that my compliance was actually a carefully constructed trap, or that I was quietly waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger and watch his entire world collapse around him. The day of the final court hearing arrived, and the atmosphere inside the courtroom was thick with tension. David strode through the doors wearing an expensive, tailored suit, a triumphant smirk plastered across his face. He sat on the opposite side of the aisle alongside his arrogant lead attorney, both of them oozing the supreme confidence of men who believed victory was an absolute certainty. They fully expected the judge to easily ratify the lopsided divorce papers and finalize my eviction without a single hitch. I sat calmly next to my lawyer, holding my breath as the proceedings began. When the judge asked if there were any objections to the terms of the prenuptial agreement, my attorney quietly stood up and approached the bench. With a calm, unwavering voice, she presented the court with the certified copies of Evelyn's hidden trust amendment, alongside the massive mountain of bank records proving David's systematic estate fraud and elder financial manipulation. The shift in the room was instantaneous. I watched as David's lawyer eagerly grabbed the copies, only for the color to drain completely from his face as his eyes scanned the text. He turned completely pale, his hands visibly shaking as he whispered frantically to my husband. David's smug grin instantly vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. Based on the explicit terms of the hidden poison pill clause, the judge immediately ordered all of David's inheritance frozen, declaring our 20-year-old prenuptial agreement completely null and void. 3 months later, the dust had finally settled, and poetic justice had been fully served. Because the prenuptial agreement was thrown out, David was legally forced to liquidate his assets to cover my rightful half of the marital property. Furthermore, his frozen inheritance was completely drained to pay back the estate for his fraudulent transfers, and he is now facing severe criminal charges for grand larceny and financial elder abuse. He lost absolutely everything he had plotted to steal. As for me, I used my rightful court settlement to pack up my belongings and move to a stunning, sun-drenched boutique interior design studio right by the coast. For the first time in 20 years, I am finally living a life of true independence, answered only to myself, and building a flourishing business under my own name. If someone had cold-heartedly used you for 2 decades just to take care of their family, would you have walked away quietly, or would you have stood up and fought back exactly?